All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We are going to unpack the absolute ultimate blueprint for mastering Shakespeare's epic, Antony and Cleopatra. Look, whether you're gearing up for major competitive exams like the UGC Net or KVS, or you're just a hardcore literature student, you already know this play is an absolute behemoth.
So, what's our game plan? Well, we're actually reverse engineering a massive, highly detailed 36-part instructional master prompt. This source material was built from the ground up to create the most comprehensive, exam-oriented study guide out there. And we've distilled the whole shebang into the exact visual framework you need to conquer this play, without spending hundreds of hours just lost in the weeds.
Because let's be real for a second, how on earth do you master Shakespeare's most epic tragedy? I mean, you've got sprawling geography crossing oceans, incredibly complex political maneuvering, and this massive critical history. How do you truly wrap your head around it without getting completely overwhelmed? The secret is structure.
To give us that structure, we've broken this down into a 5-part syllabus: the foundation, the architecture, the inhabitants, deep literary analysis, and finally, winning exam strategies.
Starting right off with part 1, the foundation. Let's look at the history and politics.
To really grasp the fiction, you've got to anchor it to reality. Shakespeare builds his plot heavily on actual historical events, primarily pulling from his main source, Plutarch's Lives. Notice how the Roman Empire's volatile shift is mapped out for us here. We start with the Second Triumvirate forming in 43 BC, push through the Battle of Philippi, and hurtle straight toward the explosive Battle of Actium in 31 BC.
And that history perfectly sets up what is literally the central duality of the entire play. On one side, you've got Rome representing the West. It's all about duty, the sword, rigid masculinity, and intense political ambition. But then, on the other side, you have Egypt representing the East, defined by luxury, the serpent, femininity, and this all-consuming passion. Every single major conflict in the story stems from these two worlds colliding.
So the crucial takeaway here is remembering how this duality defines the genre itself. This isn't just some standard romance, right? As this definition points out, it is a Roman tragedy. That means the personal flaws of our main characters don't just ruin their own lives. They directly alter the fate of an entire global empire. The political and the personal are completely intertwined.
Moving right along to part 2, the architecture, where we look at plot in the epic.
You can really see the precise machinery Shakespeare built here across the 5 acts. We kick off with that initial tension between love and duty, we navigate these super fragile political alliances, we hit the climax, and then fall rapidly into betrayal and those infamous dual suicides. Notice the center point, the Battle of Actium. Make sure to know this, because it's a highly testable exam topic since it's the absolute hinge of the whole narrative.
Let's actually zero in on that climax for a second. Actium isn't just some military loss for Antony. It is the definitive, symbolic moment where he actively chooses his passion for Cleopatra over his military glory and his duty to Rome. The exact moment those ships turn around, the tragic fate of both our protagonists is completely sealed. No going back.
Okay, part 3, the inhabitants. Let's talk characters and relationships.
This table is basically your cheat sheet for mapping out all those shifting loyalties. Mark Antony is hopelessly torn between love and honor. Cleopatra? She's fiercely loyal to Egypt and, well, her own power. But definitely look at Anabarbus at the bottom. He's motivated by reason and duty, serving as the choric figure, basically the voice of objective reality for the audience, until things get so bad that even he abandons Antony.
And to truly nail the character dynamics, you've got to see the stark contrast between our 2 primary Roman leaders. You have Mark Antony, this aging, passionate hero who's ruled by his emotions and trapped in a tragic decline. Pitted directly against him is Octavius Caesar, who is calculating, ice-cold, ruled entirely by logic, and on a path of inevitable rise. It's just a total masterclass in character foil.
That brings us to part 4, deep literary analysis, or as I like to think of it, the interior design. Shakespeare weaves this incredibly dense web of imagery throughout the text. Notice the constant tug-of-war between the fluid, fertile, and sometimes super treacherous water imagery of the Egyptian Nile versus the rigid, honor-bound martial imagery of the Roman sword. Also, keep an eye on that motif of performance. Both Cleopatra and Caesar are hyper-aware of the literal roles they're playing on the world stage. Now, a huge chunk of your analysis needs to focus on hamartia.
Understanding Antony's tragic flaw, which is that all-consuming passion, overriding his instinct for political survival, and analyzing how it aligns with or breaks away from Aristotle's traditional model is an absolute must-do for any long-form essay questions.
And listen, if you really want to level up those essay scores, you've got to bring in some critical theory. Pulling from these lenses changes everything. Whether you reference a feminist reading of Cleopatra's Power, a post-colonial take on the East-West imperial clash, or a new historicist connection to the actual political anxieties of King James I, you are proving to the examiner that you have a top-tier grasp of the material.
Finally, we hit Part 5, Winning Exam Strategies. Time for the final inspection.
First things first, you need a few killer quotes locked and loaded. This line right here, spoken by Enobibars, is an all-time classic. Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety. It just brilliantly captures Cleopatra's mesmerizing, almost supernatural power, and it is a massive staple in competitive exams. Definitely memorize this one.
When exam pressure hits, it's really easy to get confused. So, use a mental framework like this to distinguish how identical events are viewed through totally different cultural lenses. Look at that bottom row, the final suicides. To Rome, that's the ultimate act of cowardice. But to Egypt, it's a noble, theatrical triumph that completely denies Caesar his prize. Knowing both sides keeps you from getting tripped up by tricky multiple-choice questions.
Now, how should you actually structure your study time? Try this tiered revision strategy. If you only have 5 minutes before class, just review the character map and timeline. Got a solid 15 minutes? Drill your top 5 quotes and definitions like hamartia. And for those big 1-hour sessions, do nothing but hammer out high-yield previous year questions or PYQs to really test for application. If you're sitting there wondering, okay, but what exactly do I focus on for those practice tests? Here are your 5-star highest frequency topics. You're practically guaranteed to see questions on Shakespeare's use of Plutarch's Lives, the symbolic weight of Actium, and that massive duality of love versus duty. Seriously, treat this list as your ultimate exam crash sheet.
Here is a quick pro tip for you. Don't just stare blankly at your notes. Actively create your own memory tricks and mnemonics to lock down those fast objective facts. When the clock is ticking down in the exam hall, some silly acronym you made up to remember the political alliances can literally be the difference between a pass and a fail.
As we wrap up this explainer and you head back to your revision, I want to leave you with one final provocative question. Ultimately, was Antony's tragic flaw a pathetic failure of his Roman leadership, or was it a magnificent triumph of his Egyptian love? Grappling with that tension is the real key to unlocking the brilliance of this play. Thank you so much for joining us, and happy studying.